Greetings, citizens, and thanks for tuning in to Nindy Nation episode 193. I'm Jeff, and today we've got a bunch of interesting new games to check out, all from independent developers, and all hitting the Nintendo Switch eShop through October 15th. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. If you dig these weekly dives into the latest Nintendo Switch indies, we'd appreciate you clicking like and subscribe. Head on down to the comments and tell me which of these games you're most looking forward to, and join us over on Discord to keep the conversation going. Alright, citizens, with all that out of the way, let's get right into it. These are the 13 new notable Nindies hitting the Nintendo Switch through Sunday, October 15th. Our first game of the week drops on Tuesday the 10th, and frankly won me over with a compelling trailer that, if I were more lazy, I'd just play and have you read through it. But that ain't how we roll here in the Nation of Nindy, so let's talk about why I'm so high on Long Days Gone. After winning awards from Day of the Devs, GamerX, Game Devs of Color, and the long-forgotten Square Enix Collective, the early access version released on Steam in 2016, where it slowly churned out new chapters over the last 7 years and is now finally complete. This role-playing game eschews many genre tropes and sees you play as Rourke, a boy raised in an underground military camp called the Corps. When he's finally of age, he visits the war-torn surface to carry out his first mission, only to find that the Corps isn't nearly the noble entity he was raised to believe it is. Now, he and his friends must team up, knock down language barriers, uncover a false flag operation, and try to put a stop to a pointless war that has consumed everyone they love. Seriously, everything I read about this game, from the glowing reviews to the developer diaries to comment sections across the internet, everything points to this being something really special. And 7 years in the oven is no joke for the small team at This I Dreamt. With the game's release, the story will finally be complete and should offer around 10 to 12 hours of gameplay. It releases with a discount for $19.99 by Serenity Forge, and looks set to deliver a modern war story that is grim, heartwarming, and hopefully rewarding in the end. Now we move on to Wednesday the 11th, but I'm still in the mood for unique RPGs with a language slant, so let's talk about Terra Alia, the language discovery RPG. Set in a world of magic and technology, countries are at peace because they agree to only use their magic to help each other, and only use magic once they've learned how to communicate with one another. You're a student at a magic academy who, after selecting your starting language, set out to a nearby country to find your missing professor. Once you get there, in order to learn that country's magic, you'll do all the usual turn-based RPG fare, but your discussions will actually teach you vocabulary words from one of the 9 other languages. It's like edutainment, but built so closely into the gameplay, you might not even notice that you're actually getting smarter. Who knew? The game looks pretty good visually, and the RPG mechanics look much deeper than they did in Long Days Gone, so this should be a more traditional affair for fans of the genre. And it's the first game to release from 30 Parallel, who found mostly positive reviews when this game hit Steam last spring. You get combat, exploration, lots of world building, and an expansion of your international vocabulary? Sounds pretty cool to me, and it releases for $14.99. Words,
story,
learning, barf! If that sounds like the voice in the back of your head and you just want to blow some shit up, well then fine. Here's Red Raptor by Novax Games. It's this week's release by East Asia Soft and is a retro-styled bullet hell shooter for $5. It's a short arcadey experience with only 5 levels, but they change a bit each time you play, and both temporary power-ups and persistent upgrades should help you compete on the leaderboards if showing off your bullet hell expertise happens to be your shtick. See? Nindy Nation's got something for everyone, and I aim to please. And on to this week's very big Thursday drop. Half Human Studios is an international team based in Florida, but don't hold that against them because their oddly named Dwarve is the first time I've been interested in a tower defense game in quite a long time. While you can fight on your feet, Most of the time, you'll be scurrying around mines and dungeons setting traps for unsuspecting enemies. And the way this blends into boss fights looks both chaotic and fun. You play as a little dude who is, in fact, named Dwarve, and on your adventure, you'll meet new companions, learn new traversal abilities, and build all kinds of new traps to impale enemies, or punch them off ledges, or burn them to a crisp, with each trap having its own skill tree totaling over 100 unlockable upgrades that should keep you busy as you work your way to the top of the Witch Queen's Mountain.
She sounds mean.
Also releasing to mostly positive reviews on Steam last spring, it marks Half Human's eShop debut and releases for $19.99. And then we've got a game that could be kinda hard to not make it sound just like the other two Lost at Sea story games we covered last week, but I'm gonna do my best, cause SE Chronicles sounds super cool. Developed by the team behind Mutazione and Sports Friends, Die Gut, damn it. Help! The team at Die Gute Fabrik, thanks Fantomic, hopefully that's close enough, pits you in a storybook-inspired world where a flood has changed life as everyone knows it. You live on a ship exploring the mostly water-filled world, and someone has kidnapped your captain. Now, you and your crew set out to uncover the conspiracy and rescue said captain, but you do so by meeting people, exploring new places, and making decisions. There's a cool issues system where crewmates will quarrel and leave you to decide if and how you want to intervene. And everything from the direction to the soundtrack to the writers have all at the very least been nominated for various indie awards, so it stands to reason there's some pretty good stuff here. I think this looks like a great little story worth exploring, and even though it's $25, you can replay it to see all kinds of new content, and it was very highly reviewed by most outlets who have already played it. Did I do a good job of not saying it's basically Waterworld but without Kevin Costner? I hope so. Oh, good, we've got a stupid game. This episode was looking way too serious, so time to bring it down a peg. Subpar Pool is the latest game to piss off my spell and grammar check, as its name is all in lowercase. And it's developed by Grapefruct Games and Webfar. Good lord, what even are those words? Anyways, as the team says,
"This is a whimsical adventure of playful pocket antics at the intersection of golf and pool."
And really, it's probably closest to mini-golf than anything else, given the layout and quirky levels that can include simple bumpers, all the way to portals and conveyor belts and all other kinds of craziness. There's also a card mechanic that can change the ball's behavior or the type of cue you have, but if you don't like cards, I wouldn't really worry about it. It seems like they're more of a way to give you some choice when you're at the whim of randomness between turns, more so than like a deck-building strategy. The difficulty also ranges from casual to hardcore, as do the various modes, which can be a fit for just a quick burst or a long play session. All in all, Subpar Pool looks like a really fun time, and it releases for $9.99. And while we've seen many approaches to the Atari remakes, I gotta say that I think Haunted House is the most interesting we've seen yet. Probably not the best, but very interesting. This time partnering with Orbit Studio, whose last release was the fun and charming Retro Machina, this game is a modern take on the Atari 2600's hide-and-seek game of the same name. At its core, I'd say this is a stealth game above all else. You play as the niece of a famous treasure hunter who is visiting her uncle's mansion, and upon your arrival, ghosts kidnap all of your friends. Your goal now is to find the pieces of some magical urn and track down your friends, which you do by exploring a procedurally generated mansion while avoiding traps, staying out of the light, and not letting any of the bad guys see you. If you're caught, you start back at the beginning with most of your progress in tow, but the mansion's floor plan has completely changed, which addresses one of the trickiest parts of roguelite design, keeping the early parts of a run just as interesting as the parts you've yet to see. It's meant to be an all-ages game, so don't expect anything very scary, and don't expect it to become too difficult. And while I doubt I'll pay $20 to see it for myself, this does seem like a solid option for a family game night in October. So in summary, I should also mention that this happens to be one of the most unique games ever where I have to remind you that Haunted House is a 3D isometric stealth game with procedurally generated levels, roguelite mechanics, and RPG elements! Demons of Asteborg might sound like a horrid infection that requires generous application of Preparation H, but it was actually a pretty solid 16-bit game released in 2021 that blended elements of Castlevania and Ghosts 'n Goblins. At the time, it was introduced as the start of a new series by French developer Neofid Studios, and this week we get to see what's next for this unfortunately named series with their release of Asteros. No, this isn't the name of a support group for people with hemorrhoids, rather it's a natural evolution serving as a prequel to their last game. With much more refined artwork, this game was actually released for the Sega Genesis over the summer, and is one of the most impressive games I've seen for that console. This time around, you pick from 3 different characters and embark on a roguelite adventure full of hacking, slashing, platforming, and some righteous-looking bosses. There's a bit of RPG in tow, as you can learn new abilities and upgrade equipment with the coins you find, and you can even have a second player join in at any time, which is a really nice addition we rarely see in games like this. But wart jokes aside, I'm absolutely digging this game, and am even considering buying a copy that I can play on my Mega SG. The visuals and effects they pull off, combined with the depth of combat, including dodge, rolls, and air dashing, are not only impressive as hell for a Genesis game, but really for any other modern 16-bit throwback like it. Launching with a 20% discount for only $10.39 makes this an easy pickup for me, but if it's even close to how much fun it looks like it is, we might be looking at something pretty special here. In 2015, Arc System Works acquired the rights to Double Dragon, Super Dodgeball, River City Ransom, and the rest of the Kunio-kun franchises, and have since gone pretty crazy releasing remakes and spiritual successors, mostly to surprisingly consistent positive results. However, I've had my guard up lately after being a bit turned off by this summer's Double Dragon Gaiden, but this week's release of River City Rival Showdown has definitely re-piqued my interest. It's actually a port of the 2016 remake of the original River City Ransom for the 3DS, which was pretty well received at the time. It's the same slower-paced beat-em-up, but the RPG systems and combat as a whole have been expanded upon to offer much more depth. As you progress through the main story, various events can pop up depending on who you're playing as, and the story will change based on if you succeed or fail in those context-sensitive events, even impacting the ending for that character. There's also a brand new 2D fighter included called Double Dragon Duel 2023, and while it looks like fun, it's the main game that I'm most interested in. And it sounds like the upgrades made to this port could justify its $25 asking price. The Kunio and River City games are one of those series that see frequent eShop sales, and while they usually don't get super cheap, I could definitely see this game being half off on Black Friday. So if that's the case, that's probably the price where I'll jump in at. And speaking of ports from the DS line of systems, next up we're going to talk about the Switch receiving its very own version of the beloved survival horror game Dementium The Ward. But first, if you don't know the story behind this game's developer, it's a very interesting one. In 2007, Jules Watson and Greg Hargrove founded Renegade Kid, who seemed to single-handedly keep indie games alive during the DS and 3DS era, releasing hits like the aforementioned Dementium, as well as Moon, Mutant Mudds, Zeodrifter, and all of their respective sequels. In 2017, the studio disbanded on amicable terms, with the 3D games going to Greg and the 2D titles falling under the wing of Jules, who used those franchises to establish the studio you now know as a TUI. Sadly, in 2018, Greg Hargrove fell victim to pancreatic cancer, so the future of games like Moon and Dementium were unknown. I say this because it seems like such a bittersweet sentiment that Jules and the team at Atui went back to the well to not only optimize and port the first game they worked on with Greg, but this week's $20 re-release of Dementium The Ward is actually rebuilt from the ground up for the Switch. If you enjoy the horror genre that focuses more on running and hiding, like Outcast and such, you should absolutely be all over this game. There are weapons and ammo to find, and you will engage in combat, but this first-person adventure that follows a guy waking up in a demented hospital is far more about the environment, storytelling, and scariness than it is running around and shooting, clearly being inspired by Doom 3 and receiving a ton of praise back when it originally released. So yeah, if you're a fan of spooky games, Dementium is a great pick for this October, and it goes to support a title that I'm sure is very close to the heart of everyone at Atui. With Thursday behind us, we now set our sights on the 2 games releasing on this October's
Friday the 13th.
And the first one should sound familiar. That's because I covered Whitstone a few weeks ago, but talked way too long for a game that had no footage and screenshots that made it look like part Persona and part twin-stick shooter. If you recall from that episode, I shared that the game follows an airship crew in the early 1900s who fall under a curse, and the main character, Jack, must figure out who he can trust as he seeks to rid the world of the demons that possessed his crew. After the game released on PC last month, we finally have some footage to look at, and yeah, it definitely tells its story like a Persona or similar modern RPG, but then the exploration and combat is much more like an isometric dungeon crawler. There's only a handful of reviews currently available for the PC version, but they all recommend the game and state that the branching dialogue paths and general sentiment that you don't know who you can trust make the investigation parts of the game really interesting. Most people enjoyed the combat, but did admit it could get a bit monotonous in between the big boss battles, but that those big boss battles were totally worth it. Overall, it sounds like a neat approach to combining these two genres while telling a cool story. If this delayed release from Hailstorm Games sounds like it's up your alley, you can pick it up with the 20% launch discount for $15.99. If it actually releases this time. And then we bid farewell to the Texas home of Hailstorm Games and make our way to Rome, the headquarters of Caracal Games Studio. They help us round out the week with a little retro throwback called Traumaterium, which releases for only $2.54. It's a first-person, randomly generated dungeon crawler built for the original Game Boy that lets you play with a controller or by flipping your Switch vertically to use it in its intended aspect ratio with touchscreen buttons. It's not how I'd play it, but it is always a fun parlor trick to show off, you know? It's a short, simple game where you pick your destination and engage in battles that look like the old Dragon Quest titles. And since everything is randomly generated, you could say that this game is infinitely replayable. For that price, it could be a fun curiosity even if it's just for an hour or two, and serves as a great game to wrap up this—
Hold on.
We don't cover many of the garbage shovelware releases anymore, but I just had to show you this one. The dumpster goblins over at Game to Top have decided that the fastest path to notoriety this week is to fart out a game that recreates the experience of diving deep beneath the ocean surface in a homemade submarine to explore the Titanic wreckage. That's right, they're trying to profit off of the OceanGate Titan disaster. Just look at this. They say,
Submersible Simulator Discover the Titanic into Ocean
is full of amazing graphics and atmosphere,
but they can't even form a grammatically correct title for this digital dog shit.
Obviously, you should not buy this, but hey, maybe we can encourage Game to Top to run a promotion where they go explore the wreckage themselves. Only this time, instead of controlling it with a Logitech gamepad, we'll give them, an N-Gauge. Outro! If RPGs are your thing, this week we've got Long Days Gone, Terra Alia, and Whitstone, and for those of you looking for a spooky fix, we've got everything from Traumaterium to Dementium, and even Haunted House for something a little on the lighter side. For me though, I am definitely picking up Asteros, and am quite interested in both Subpar Pool and River City Rival Showdown. But what about you? Sound off in the comments, and if you can tell me the next tasteless disaster Game to Top should try to profit off of, I'll send a game code out to the person who writes my favorite pitch. As you know, we've got some big AAA games releasing on the Switch between now and the end of the month, with Batman, Mario, Sonic, Hot Wheels, and even Metal Gear Solid all releasing before the end of the month. So there is a chance that the indies might try to stay out of their way, but we've still got some pretty interesting releases coming up, like Warm Snow and its isometric samurai action, the 10th Jackbox Party Pack, and Bish Bash Bots, which just so happens to be a
Zany multiplayer party game with a gimmick!
where that gimmick is something you'll hear about next time, because we're all done for today. Thanks so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and sharing Nindy Nation with others. Until next week, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindy Nation episode 193, and remember, no matter what type of game you're looking for, Nindy Nation will be right here to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.